100 frames. The camera decided the exposure for each one after the first. It calculated the transitions, optimized the brightness across the sequence. I pressed the shutter. Where's the craft computer balance in that? You go to the red camera menu, you go to the 5th setting along, and that gives you focus bracketing. What this means is when this is set to enable, next time you press the shutter, it will follow the instructions that you've got here on the screen. Number of shots, focus increment, exposure, smoothing, etc. The number of shots. For a macro photograph, 100 is not a very large number. It's very easy to shoot off 100 shots when your depth of field is less than a millimetre. I tend to use more shots than I think I'm going to need in macro, simply so that I can choose the best combination in processing afterwards. Focus increment describes the gap between the shots. Effectively, you're advancing the focus, so you're moving an area of sharp focus to another area of sharp focus, and everything else is out of focus. Ideally, the sharp focus areas will overlap. If you're doing landscape photography, this gap could be up to 100 meters. If you're doing macro photography, you're dealing in sub-millimeter distances. So the camera calculates this based on the total depth of field. Exposure smoothing. If a shadow blows across your scene, and yes, we're talking macro, so we're talking very tiny increments of time, but if a shadow blows across, it will ruin the sequence. What exposure smoothing does is adjust the brightness in order to have it match the brightness of the first shot, which is set by the photographer. Depth composite empowers the camera to create the composite so that there's no need to take it outside of the camera into Photoshop or into Lightroom or Helicon Focus. The camera creates the JPEG. The downside of this is it's going to use your in-camera JPEG settings in order to create the colors, and that may not be what you want. So my preference always is to go for something like Helicon Focus. Crop depth composite enables the camera to trim the edges of the shot. This is because as you shift focus, there's a phenomenon called focus breathing, where the actual size of the picture changes, so the edges will not be common to all shots. What the flash interval does is allow you to set the interval between shots to allow the flash to recycle. Now this defaults to 1 second, but if you're using a Canon flash or a compatible flash, it will take its cue from the flash recycle if you set it to 0. It seems like we've made some fairly arbitrary decisions in the photo community. AI in Photoshop, not acceptable. Replacing skies, not acceptable. But in camera, there is advanced computational technology going on that is making decisions which are, to my mind, part of the craft. When I learned to do macro photography really in the context of photographing products, bottles of wine and so on, we used a focus rail to advance the physical position of the camera a millimetre at a time so that we didn't have any fade out on the writing on the label. And it took forever. And one mistake, one frame, with shadows cast across it is ruined. The camera is making a lot of decisions here. And I have to say, on thinking about this, I applaud it. I mean, it has enabled me to take a couple of the photographs that you're going to see later here. It's made the difference between getting the shot, getting the stack, and not getting the stack. And I think it's fantastic, personally. But I do think, I do think we should really sort of have a look at ourselves in relation to how we react to computational technology. Where is that dividing line exactly? Because it's not as straightforward as rejecting AI in processing. There's a lot of stuff that the camera is doing that is advanced computational technology. And with that, let's get into the shoot. First of all, the camera and lens. So it's a Canon R5. I'm going to use the automated settings in order to shoot 100 frames of my subject, or up to 100 frames of my subject. I'm using two lenses. So I'm using a dedicated macro lens, 100mm. So this gets literally life-size magnification onto the center, 1:1 ratio. I'm going to also use this 70-200mm lens with the addition of the Raynox 250 magnifying adapter. Now what this will do is attach to any ordinary lens. It's going to effectively work as a magnifying glass, and it will go up to 2.5 times life size. So for things like, it's a very viable solution if you're out hiking. You don't want to take too many lenses. You can double up with one of your ordinary lenses. Now to fit this lens, it does need to have a step-up ring, and I've fitted to it a 72 or rather a 67-72mm step-up, step-down ring. Okay, so the lens, the diopter will fit, the magnifying part will fit, and it will just clip into the front of my lens like this. We've got a very sturdy tripod here. This is the Feisal CT3442 tripod. This is my favourite travel tripod actually. It's very, very sturdy, carbon fibre, very light for hiking. It will, this takes it about 1.5 foot off the ground. Once you've got the camera on top of it, it's probably 1.5 foot. But I can splay these legs much wider, and I also have a center column attachment if I want, so I can reverse it and put the sling the camera underneath it to get this sort of height. So very convenient, a very excellent tripod. It's actually fitted with an Acrotec panoramic head, and I find this is fine. I've got a ball head as well. The ball head's slightly quicker to set up, but I actually use the panoramic head almost all of the time. I can get to any angle that I want on it because it adjusts in two dimensions. Okay, so there we are for kit. Let's go off and find something to photograph. Now if we can get this one, the problem we've got here of course is wind, and it's holding this thing still, so I might just have to wait until I get a little bit of a gap in the wind, but this could be really nice. So here we've got a really typical pine forest scene, but look what we've got here. There we've got the pine cone on top of a rock with a few bits of grass. I mean, this is a really good topic. So what I'm going to do is shoot this with the macro lens as normal, same treatment as the other ones, and then I'm going to try shooting it with the 70-200mm and then with the 70-200mm with the diopter fitted to the front. So let's see how we get on. This is the workflow. So I started out with the camera set to shoot 100 shots, and the reason I did that was that I didn't know what I was going to find down there. So it could have required great depth or lesser depth. So what I do is this. load the photographs into Lightroom first of all. Okay, so I've got here 100 shots of this praying mantis, I think it is. And the task is essentially, the praying mantis is the focus of the picture. This is what we want the picture to be of. So what I need is for the entire praying mantis body to be in focus and nothing behind it, ideally, because anything behind it is just going to distract. So I go and I find the picture that where it starts to tail off. So okay, that's the back end of the animal. It's just slipping out of focus. That's in focus there. Okay, so I select those pictures and that will give me my stack. So let's export to Helicon Focus as TIFFs. This is just the way that I do it. So it's 11 frames. Okay, and here we are in Helicon Focus. Now I've got choice of rendering methods, and we'll have a look at those in a second. Smoothing is the transition between shots. So here this is relatively flat, so the total depth of field that I'm interested in here is probably no more than a centimetre. It's basically the distance between his two knees. Alright, so let's go into preview and have a look and see what that looks like off the bat. Pretty good. Okay, so that's the rendering of them. We can see both the antenna very clearly. See his side of his head, the two knees, and all the way back to the back side of him. And some of these, this for example, is a leg. Now, I'm not sure where the corresponding leg is on the other side, but it doesn't really matter. We've got what we want here in this shot. So I can look at the auto adjustments. I can make adjustments here should I wish to. I don't really want to do that. Here I can drag to look at the source. This will take me through the source images, and you can see that it's made a pretty good job of moving and adjusting these images to fit, because this was handheld. Okay, so I'm going to go for render, and you can see here it's compiling the in focus. I've got pyramid selected, so I'm just going to get the sharpest pixels, and because this was handheld, that's exactly what I want. I want the pixels that are really sharp, and I want to discard any of the other ones. Okay, so that's that one, and we save this, and that will save it back to the folder that it came from. Okay, and I have to exit Helicon Focus. Here is the picture in Lightroom, so it inserts it at the beginning of the sequence. So what I would typically do now is to delete all of the constituent parts. I'm happy with this picture, and this is really quite good, or at least for my purposes. It's quite good. Bang in the middle. Yeah, that's nice. I like this. are the problems? What are the gotchas around macro photography? Well, this was a very basic setup, and I got lucky with the light. If by the time I found the praying mantis, there was quite a lot of cloud coverage, so it really made the light a lot softer. Had I shot that in direct sunlight, there would have been a lot of probably reflection off the skin, shell, carapace of the insect that would have ruined the shot. So that's one thing. So you get into a world of accessorizing with macro photography, and I think there's as soon as you start using flash, then you're going to have to deal with reflections, so you're going to need something to take the harshness out of the flash. There are some excellent modifiers on the market, and we'll be having a look at those in a subsequent video. Wind is a real problem, any movement. Now, as I demonstrated here, there was movement in a couple of stacks, and the software was able to cope with that, but I wouldn't like to rely on that 100%. There's a wonderful thing called the Wimberley clamp that you can clip to your tripod and clip to the stem of the plant to hold it still relative to the camera, and that's a very useful thing to have. So yeah, I mean it does start to generate its own kit and its own purchase list after a while. What else? You have to be careful with the light, with the changes of the light. Again, we've demonstrated how the camera helps to cope with that. But obviously it's better to have it consistent. And of course, if you're photographing outdoors, that's not always possible. Probably the other thing to watch out for is you're dealing with a very, very high level of precision. And the way that I've approached it is to use the fact that I can shoot lots of frames in a second in order to defer the decisions about depth of field until later. Okay, so I've got shots with all of these pictures that we've looked at. I shot 100 shots, so not all of them, but some of them were less, 50 or so. It's in these shots, it was never necessary to shoot 100. I could easily have got away with 50. A couple of the final images were down to between 10 and 15 images, simply to get the depth of field that I needed rather than the entire depth of field. So that's a neat thing that you can rely on the technology to do. So I think it's very macro photography is really diverting. I really enjoyed my day out. One of the things that I noticed was I'm used to looking at big landscapes, and there's nothing like macro photography to get you into the moment, because you're really focusing on tiny, tiny details, and you start to see stuff. So it's, you know, a point is, how many of these praying mantises have I walked past in my life? Probably lots. Yeah, I don't know. I think I got lucky on this day. Okay guys, so thanks for watching if you're with us this far. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do subscribe to the channel. And if you enjoyed the video, or if it was useful, do give it a like down below. That really helps to get the video out in front of other people who are interested in this type of photography. Thanks very much guys, we'll see you next week. Bye now.